Hi, my name's Mariska, and this is the story of how my husband handed me divorce papers, already filled out, thinking I'd cry and beg him to stay. He thought he knew me, thought I'd shrink, thought I was too weak to fight back. But what he didn't know was that the house he lived in, it was mine, that the company he mocked, I built it behind his back, and when I finally signed those papers, he cried harder than I ever did. But how did we get there? How does a marriage end in silence, manipulation, and a sealed envelope on a breakfast table? How does a woman like me get erased by her own family and still rise? Would you stay if the man you married planned his exit before he ever gave you a chance to speak? It was one of those Sundays where the sun hit just right through the kitchen window, warming the countertops I'd wiped down hours ago. I had been up since 6, prepping the roast, chopping vegetables, setting out the cloth napkins my mother gave me when I got married. They were cream-colored, embroidered with my initials, my only initials, since I never took his last name. Wendell never noticed. The house smelled of rosemary and garlic when Delphine walked in, trailing expensive perfume and judgment. She glanced around like she was inspecting a hotel suite, not the home I kept spotless every single day. Wendell followed right behind, laughing too loudly at something she said. They didn't even say hello to me. I smiled, like I always did. Lunch was on the table by 1, just like Delphine liked. She settled into the chair at the head of the table, a chair I used only when no one else was home. Wendell sat next to her. I poured iced tea, filled plates, made sure the butter was soft but not melted. I asked if anyone wanted extra dressing. No one answered. "So," I said gently, "I was thinking maybe we could all take a short weekend trip. Somewhere by the lake?" Silence. Delphine dabbed her mouth with a napkin, turned to Wendell and said, "You know, a weekend at the lake would be nice. I heard the cabins up near Marble Falls are beautiful this time of year." Wendell lit up. "That's a great idea, Mom." And just like that, everyone agreed. My words had vanished from the room like they were never spoken. I laughed with them, a soft little sound that barely made it past my lips. But inside, I felt like I was dissolving. It wasn't the first time. A few months back, the church released their annual donor list. I stared at the bulletin board after Sunday service, looking for our names. Wendell Hartman was listed right under Gold tier, just below his parents. No mention of me. I was the one who'd written the check. I was the one who donated in memory of my father. But no one asked. Back at home, after clearing the plates, Delphine never lifted a finger. I stood near the living room doorway while Wendell and his mother admired the sofa set. It was beige with deep cushions, the kind of thing you'd see in a catalog. I picked it. I paid for it. It had been my gift to us after the wedding, using the money my aunt had given me in lieu of a bridal shower. Delphine ran her hand over the armrest. "I always knew this style would work in this house," she said. "Glad you listened to me, Wendell." He laughed. "Yeah, Mom's got great taste. This whole living room feels like her." My breath caught. I didn't marry a man. I married a monument to his mother. To everyone else, I had the perfect husband. "He helps around the house," they'd say. "He's such a sweet guy." They didn't see the dishes I washed, the laundry I folded, the bills I paid. Wendell hadn't cooked since our anniversary. That was a year ago. And Delphine? She called her helpful because she brought over banana bread and rearranged my kitchen cabinets. She said she was optimizing flow. I had spent months getting it exactly how I liked it. I said nothing. And that night, after they left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my hands. I wasn't sure when they started shaking. I rubbed my thumb across my palm like I was trying to smooth something invisible. My family had always said I was sensitive. Being the youngest, you get told to compromise, to keep the peace. That pride is expensive, but silence is cheap. I could still hear my mother's voice. Peace is worth more than pride. But what if both were dead now? What if I was choking on peace? I got up to put away the dishes, moving slowly through the kitchen like my bones were heavy. Wendell was upstairs watching sports. He hadn't said a word since his mother left. I walked past the staircase, went straight into our bedroom. The wedding picture still hung above our bed. My smile in the photo looked fake now, too white, too wide. I opened the drawer of my nightstand to grab a sweater. The room had turned chilly. but my hand touched something smooth, not fabric. It was a sealed envelope, cream-colored, no stamp, no return address. I pulled it out and sat on the edge of the bed. The envelope was thick, heavy in my palm, like it knew what it contained would shift something inside me. My fingers hovered on the edge, not ready to tear it open, but also unable to let it go. My heart didn't race. It didn't need to. I already knew. I didn't open that envelope right away. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes, just staring at it, like it might vanish if I waited long enough, but the weight of it sat in my lap, real and undeniable. Eventually, I ran a finger along the seal and pulled it open. Inside wasn't a letter. It wasn't a card. It was a stack of neatly clipped pages, a divorce petition, drafted, signed, dated. His name was there, in ink, Wendell S. Hartman, and under respondent, in a blank space, waited mine, Mariska L. Nguyen. Every line was filled except for the financial sections. There were no notes on the house, no mention of the bank accounts or the car or the business I built behind the scenes. He'd left those parts open, unfinished, as if he assumed he'd fill those in later, maybe after I begged him to stay. My breath stayed shallow as I flipped page after page, wondering how long this had been tucked away. My mind jumped to that Tuesday he came home unusually quiet, the time he'd gone 3 days without speaking after I told him I'd started consulting for a firm in Denver. Was he planning this then? I pressed the papers flat across my knees and read the header again. Petitioner, Wendell S. Hartman. Petitioner. I didn't feel fear, not right then, just insulted. He'd written me out of our story before I even knew he'd picked up a pen. That night, I said nothing. I folded the papers back neatly, tucked them into a manila folder, and locked them in the safe behind my books. The one he thought held our marriage certificate and some travel documents. Maybe he never expected me to find the envelope, or maybe he hoped I would, and that it'd scare me into being quiet again. He'd used silence as a weapon before. It worked the first time. We'd been married just over 2 years when I confronted him about the way he talked to me in front of his mom. He hadn't shouted or cursed. He just didn't speak to me for 3 full days, moved into the guest room, left his dirty dishes in the sink, turned the volume up on the TV loud enough to drown out the sound of me crying in the shower. When I finally apologized, he kissed my forehead and said, "Glad we're back to normal." That was the script. His silence. My apologies. Over and over. A performance we'd perfected. Except this time, I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. I just cooked dinner, cleaned up, and laid in bed next to him like nothing had changed. But something had. Something cracked. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I was still in my robe, coffee half finished, when I peeked through the window and saw a familiar brown paper bag on the front step. Groceries. Delphine's handwriting on the note attached. For rye, no spice, don't let Kelly eat it. Kelly. Not even my name. I stood there for a full minute, the paper growing damp in my hands. The containers inside were clearly labeled, each with a little smiley face she drew when she wanted to act cute. Homemade meatloaf, her famous chicken casserole. I used to pretend it didn't bother me, that it was sweet even. Wendell came down the stairs in sweats, scratched his neck, and pulled the bag open. "Oh, nice. She made the casserole." He sniffed it. "Smells just like childhood." He didn't look at me once. Just grabbed a fork, popped open a lid, and took a bite. "Still better than yours," he said casually, his mouth full. I didn't reply. I just stood there, holding my coffee, listening to him scrape the bottom of the container. Later that evening, we sat at the same table, but worlds apart. I ate the leftover stir-fry from the night before. He played video games in the living room. Delphine called him at least twice. He answered both times, smiling, nodding, occasionally glancing at me like I wasn't even real. The house was quiet, except for the sounds of his game, explosions, gunfire, digital chaos. And still, I thought, if this house burned down tomorrow, would I even miss it? That thought startled me, not because it was dark, but because it felt honest. The walls had once felt warm, like I'd poured something of myself into them. The paint color in the dining room? I picked that. The light fixtures? I chose those on a chilly January afternoon, standing in Home Depot with a coupon and a dream. Now they were just walls, fixtures, spaces I passed through. That night, while Wendell snored beside me, I got up, retrieved the envelope again, and turned on the desk lamp. I read it slowly this time, more carefully. Took a pencil and circled the words that stuck out. Petitioner. Respondent. Grounds. Irreconcilable differences. Irreconcilable. He had written me out of this marriage without telling me because he thought I wouldn't respond. But I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't the woman who cried in the shower. I was something else now. Something quieter, stronger. I put the folder back in the safe, closed it, and spun the dial. Not yet. But soon. The next morning, I brushed my hair in front of the mirror, the one with the cracked corner. I hadn't replaced it yet. I stared at my reflection and whispered, "You wanted me quiet? You got it. But don't confuse quiet with weak." My phone buzzed. A message from Delphine. "You really should have learned by now, sweetheart." No context, no greeting. Just that. I smiled. Not a soft smile, not a polite one, a dangerous one. If I was going to leave, I needed to be smart and invisible. But as I sat on the couch that Wednesday night, lights dimmed and the room blanketed in that thick silence I'd come to recognize as normal, a familiar ache crept in. Not fear, not hesitation, loneliness. The kind that makes you reach for a voice that once felt like home, even if it hasn't sounded like one in years. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. My thumb stopped on Isolde, my older sister, the responsible one, the golden child, the one who always made straight A's and married a dentist who played golf and called our mother every Sunday without fail. I hadn't spoken to her in months. Not really. We'd exchanged Christmas cards. She sent me a photo of her kids in matching sweaters. I liked the post. That was it. Still, I hit call. She picked up after the third ring. "Hey, Mari," she said, sounding distracted. Hey, I was just wondering if you had a minute," I said. A pause. I heard clinking dishes in the background. "Is this about Wendell again?" she asked. I swallowed. "Yeah, I needed to talk." Isolde sighed. "Mari, I really can't. I've had a long day, and honestly, maybe you should try journaling or something." "Isolde, I'm sorry, okay? But I can't be your therapist every time you and Wendell have a spat. You married him. You chose this." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there, staring at my phone. The screen still glowed with her name. My hands didn't tremble. I didn't cry. But something settled into my chest, dense and quiet. The kind of hurt that doesn't scream. It just sits there, like an old coat you forgot was heavy. I leaned back and closed my eyes, and just like that, I was 10 again, sitting at the dinner table in Garland while Isolde showed off her report card. My mother beamed at her, her voice laced with pride. 4 A's and a B+ in math? That's my girl. I reached for a roll. My father said, "Pass the butter, Mari." No one asked how school was. I cleared the plates after dessert, listening to Isolde laugh about the play she was starring in. I had auditioned too. I hadn't even gotten a call back. "You're better at support, baby," my mother whispered to me once, patting my hand. Not everyone needs the spotlight. It wasn't cruel, just matter of fact, like gravity. Even now, when I visited home, I was still the one who gets too worked up. The emotional sister. The one who just needs to let things go. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, flicking on the light. The bulb hummed. I filled the kettle and set it to boil, then pulled down my favorite mug. The blue one with the chipped rim. Wendell hated that mug. Said it looked trashy. I poured the tea, sat at the table, and stared at the steam. The seat across from me was empty. Had been for a while. I'd grown used to talking to no one. But tonight, the silence had edges. I unlocked my phone again and typed a message to my mom. "Just had a rough day. Wanted to hear your voice." My finger hovered over send. I stared at it, then tapped backspace until the screen was empty. She wouldn't understand. She never had. Her last voicemail still lived in my inbox. I played it. "Your sister's marriage works because she lets things go. Don't be so intense, baby. Try to enjoy the life you have. Enjoy the life I have. Wendell hadn't spoken to me in any meaningful way in weeks. He lived in the same house but occupied a separate orbit. He left messes for me to clean, answered questions with shrugs, and communicated with Delphine more than he did with me. And my mother thought I should be grateful. That was the script I was raised on. Keep things peaceful. Don't make noise. Smile, even when you're choking. I set the phone down and picked up a pen. I opened the notebook I kept in the drawer, the one I usually used for grocery lists and recipes. This time, I flipped to a blank page and began to write. I have no rescue coming, no cavalry. I am my own. I paused. Let the words settle. Then I continued. I've made excuses for him for years, covered for him, lied to myself and to others, protected his image while mine crumbled. Not anymore. I drew a line on the page and wrote beneath it. From here forward, I play dumb, but I'm not. I disappear first. Then I hit back. It didn't feel like anger. It felt like clarity. I closed the notebook, slid it back into the drawer, and returned to the living room. The tea had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. Across the room, the television buzzed faintly. Wendell had fallen asleep on the couch again, his mouth open, controller still in hand. I looked at him, not with hate, but with the kind of detachment you give to a stranger on a bus. And then I walked back into the bedroom, opened the small filing case from the closet, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The edges were worn from being opened and refolded too many times. Across the top in my handwriting were the words, "People who won't be notified." I took the pen, drew a line through Isolde's name. Wendell wasn't just a bad husband. He was a man preparing for war without telling me. That realization didn't slap me across the face. It seeped in slowly, like water under a locked door. Quiet. Constant. 2 nights later, I was dusting the baseboards in our bedroom, something I usually did on Saturdays, but it was only Thursday. I wasn't trying to clean. I was trying not to think. That's when I pulled the bed skirt up and saw it. A small, beat-up shoebox I didn't recognize. It didn't look like much. No label, no lock, just an old lid held down with a rubber band that had seen better days. I pulled it out gently, careful not to disturb the bed frame, sat cross-legged on the carpet, and took a breath before lifting the top. Inside was a manila folder, labeled Plan B. My blood ran cold. My name wasn't even in the folder yet, but I knew. I opened it. Inside were finalized divorce documents, Wendell's signature at the bottom, dated 5 months ago. 5 months. That would have been around the time I got offered that consulting gig in Denver. He had filled out everything. His name was inked, the paperwork notarized. But mine, my signature line was left blank, like an invitation. Tucked behind the forms was a handwritten checklist, a real one, on lined paper. His penmanship, blocky, rushed. Move out, take truck, call mom, transfer savings, emergency only, rent temp apt. Let her cool off, she'll come back. He had an entire fallback strategy. For our marriage, that wasn't just betrayal. That was logistics, and logistics meant intention. I sat there for several minutes, staring at that list. My knees hurt from kneeling, but I didn't move. Eventually, I put everything back inside the box and shoved it deeper under the bed, covered it with one of his old college hoodies, and walked into the bathroom. Wendell was in the kitchen making himself eggs. I heard the skillet scrape the burner. He was humming, like he hadn't just tried to ghost his own wife from her own life. When I walked in, he looked up and gestured at the eggs. "You want some?" "I made yours the way you like, no runny yolks." I forced a smile and shook my head. "I'm good." He shrugged, scooped the eggs onto a plate, and went to the living room. "You sure you're not upset about something?" he asked, eyes still on the TV. "You've been kinda quiet." I stood behind him for a beat too long, then turned to refill my coffee. "Just tired." "Okay." He didn't push. He never did. Wendell didn't like confrontation unless he was controlling it. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Delphine. It popped up while I was transferring laundry from washer to dryer. "Sunday dinner at 5. Boys only." That's it. No hi, no context, just that. I opened the group chat and felt my stomach drop. I wasn't in it anymore. The family group, the one with holiday plans, vacation updates, baby photos, was missing from my list. I searched for it. Nothing. My name had been removed. It didn't hurt the way I expected. It just confirmed things. Validated what I already knew. I was being phased out like old furniture, moved out quietly, no loud breakup, just silence. A slow erase. I scrolled back through the chat logs that were still saved in my phone. My birthday, ignored. The thank you text I sent after hosting last month's barbecue, unanswered. The flowers I mailed when Wendell's niece had her dance recital, no acknowledgement. I sat on the floor of the laundry room and let my arms hang limp. Later that night, Wendell and I lay in bed, backs turned to each other like strangers on an overnight flight. The room was dark, except for the faint blue glow from his phone. He typed quietly, laughed under his breath once. Then he whispered. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard enough. She's losing it, Mom. No, just give it time. I've got it handled. Yeah, she's emotional as usual. Then silence. I turned toward the wall, trying to slow my breathing. My throat tightened. Not from tears, those dried up 2 fights ago, but from fury, cold, focused fury. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and typed out what I remembered into a note. She's losing it, Mom. Just give it time. Emotional as usual. I titled it, Documentation. The next morning, while Wendell left for the gym, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open. My tea went cold as I dove deep into legal blogs, advice forums, testimonials from women who'd been where I was. I started a fresh document titled, Prep. First bullet, hire an attorney. Second, move my savings. Third, make copies of everything. Fourth, act normal. Final note, do, not confront, yet. I was still reading when I heard the front door open. Wendell came in humming again, dropped his keys on the counter, and kissed my cheek. You're up early. I smiled. Felt like cleaning. He nodded, wandered into the living room, and turned on the TV. ESPN, of course. I closed the laptop, cleaned up the dishes I hadn't used, and walked into the bedroom. My body moved out of habit, but my mind was somewhere else. The safe was still behind the closet panel. I checked it again, not because I didn't trust myself, but because I wanted to feel the click of the dial one more time, like a ritual. I touched the manila folder again, not to read it, just to feel its presence, to remind myself of what had already been set in motion. When I opened my laptop again later that night, I didn't search for advice. I knew what I had to do. I opened a private browser, typed slowly. Best female divorce attorney in Austin, discreet. I pressed enter. And for the first time in months, I saw my own reflection in the screen. And it didn't look blurry anymore. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just needed to write my name where it mattered. And that morning, I almost laughed at how perfectly he handed me the pen. Saturday began like any other in our house. Wendell whistled in the kitchen, a tune I didn't recognize. Something upbeat, probably from a car commercial. He rarely cooked, but today he was playing the part. Eggs on the stove, bacon sizzling, a second mug of coffee already set on the table before I even walked in. You're up early, he said, grinning. Big plans today? I sat down slowly, scanning the table. He'd even laid out a cloth napkin and folded it into a triangle, like we were at some diner pretending to be fancy. It was almost charming, almost. No plans, I replied. Just catching up on errands. He nodded, slid a plate toward me, and sat across the table. Good, I made your eggs firm, not runny. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted exactly how I made it every morning. He must have just poured it. Then, without warning, he reached into a drawer behind him, pulled out a slim envelope, and placed it beside my fork. No pressure, he said, in that light voice he used when he wanted to be playful but couldn't hide the undertone. Just in case. I stared at the envelope. It was crisp, sealed. No smudges on the flap, no corner creases. Whatever was inside had been handled carefully, deliberately. I didn't open it. Instead, I looked at him and said, Thanks. He blinked, a little thrown off by my lack of reaction, but covered it with a chuckle. See? I knew you'd get it. I just like to be prepared, that's all. Prepared. The man who couldn't set an alarm on time, who needed reminders to pay the electric bill, who didn't know where we kept the tax files, was prepared enough to have divorce papers drawn up, signed, and gifted like a party favor. I picked up the envelope, placed it in my handbag beside my keys, zipped it shut, and took another bite of toast. "I'll take a look later," I said, not meeting his eyes. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms behind his head like he'd won something. "No rush. You're not going anywhere." That's what he thought. We went through the rest of breakfast like two actors in a scene neither of us believed. He commented on the weather. I nodded. He laughed at a meme on his phone. I smiled politely. When I cleared the table, he thanked me, and when I turned my back, I knew he was watching, waiting for some crack to show. But I gave him nothing. That evening, I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing dishes while he watched TV. The same noise, the same channels, the same dent in the couch cushion where he always sat. I dried my hands, walked into the living room, and stood quietly until he looked up. "Wendell," I said, keeping my tone calm, "if you ever actually submit those papers, make sure you're ready for what comes with it." He looked amused, not threatened. "What, you gonna take the couch?" I didn't blink. "Just be sure you understand what you're offering before you hand it over." He laughed, shaking his head like I was a child playing pretend. "You won't do anything. You love the life I let you have." "Let me have." I nodded slowly and walked away, not saying another word. I didn't need to argue. He thought he was holding the leash. He hadn't noticed I'd already slipped it off. That night, after he went to bed, I opened my notebook, the one I kept hidden behind the cookbooks in the pantry. I flipped through pages filled with records, dates, conversations, screenshots. I added a new entry at the top. 5/6, received new envelope. Signed, dated. Witnessed him deliver it. Confirmed his intentions. I filed it with the rest, closed the notebook, and labeled it with a red sticker. Then I sat in front of the mirror, brushing my hair, just like always. I looked into my own eyes and whispered, "This is the last time you get to play small." I remembered something then. A conversation from 3 years ago. The first real crack. We'd been married a little over 2 years. I had tried a new recipe, something I'd been excited about, a pasta dish I saw on a cooking show. Wendell had walked in, took one bite, and grimaced. "This is what you've been working on all afternoon?" I smiled nervously. "I know it's different, but I thought, you're lucky I put up with all this, Mari." That was the moment. Not because of what he said, but how he said it, like he believed it, like he meant it. "You're lucky I put up with you." Since then, every disagreement, every instance of him dismissing me, belittling my thoughts, ignoring my efforts, they all traced back to that moment, that belief, that he was doing me a favor by staying married to me. I knew better now. He thought I was too attached, too afraid, too dependent. But fear and dependence are not the same thing. One is a chain, the other, a choice, and I was done choosing this. I opened the drawer next to the desk and pulled out the folder I'd been building. Inside were documents, letters, copies of the deed, financial records, all neatly organized. I took out a pen and added a new note on the cover. He escalated first. I warned him. Next time, I don't warn him in. Revenge doesn't need fireworks, just a signature in the right line. And that signature, in thick blue ink at the bottom of page 4, was mine. Legally sound, ironclad. 5 years of married performance, unraveled by a line I'd practiced 1,000 times in my head, but signed only once. 3 days after Wendell handed me that envelope over eggs, I sat at the breakfast nook, sipping coffee, waiting for the knock. He was in his usual spot on the couch, half watching some rerun of a game he'd already seen twice. When the doorbell rang, he barely reacted. "Get that, babe?" he called out. I was already standing. Outside stood a man in a navy jacket holding a clipboard and an envelope. His badge read, "Process Server, Travis County." I opened the door without a word. "Mrs. Nguyen?" he asked, calm, practiced. "Yes." He handed me the envelope. "Documents for Mr. Wendell Hartman." I turned slightly. "He's in the living room." The man stepped in, nodded politely, and said in a voice just loud enough for both of us to hear, "Mr. Hartman, you've been served." Wendell turned, startled. "What?" He stood up, took the envelope, and flipped it open right there. "What the hell is this?" "Notice to vacate, along with proof of ownership," I said. He scanned the documents, eyebrows rising as the realization sank in. "This house is in your name?" I nodded. "And it's not community property. I bought it before we were married, under an LLC. His mouth hung open, speechless for the first time in weeks. "Let me guess," I continued. "You thought we'd just split everything. That because we were married, it automatically became yours too." He didn't answer. "You never asked. You just assumed." He dropped the papers on the coffee table. "You're kicking me out?" "No," I said calmly. "The law is." That afternoon, while he sat in the bedroom pacing and calling people who didn't answer, I poured myself another cup of tea and opened the curtains. It was sunny, unusually breezy for Austin. I had the windows open, and the wind carried the sound of lawnmowers and birdsong, and for a moment, I let it wash over me like background music to a life I hadn't lived yet. Around 3, Delphine showed up. I didn't even hear her car pull in, just the sound of the front door slamming and the unmistakable voice of someone who's used to being heard. "You've lost your mind!" she shrieked, heels clicking against the tile as she stormed in. I stayed seated at the kitchen island, calm, ready. "This is our family home," she barked. "You think you can just erase history with a document?" I met her gaze evenly. "It's not history, it's property, and it's mine. Wendell grew up here." "No," I corrected. "Wendell lived here. After I bought it. Before we were married." He didn't put in a single dime. I handled the down payment, the mortgage, the taxes, everything. The house was in a holding LLC under my name before he ever moved in. The title's clean. The records are public. Delphine narrowed her eyes. "You really think this will make you look good in court?" "I'm not here for court. I'm here for truth," she scoffed. "You'll ruin your own husband?" "No," I replied, standing slowly. "He ruined himself. I'm just calling it." She opened her mouth again, but I didn't give her time. "You both have 72 hours to vacate. The server was clear. You can scream all you want, but unless you want an officer at your door, I suggest you use the time wisely." She stood there, trembling in fury, but not moving. "I always knew you were ungrateful," she hissed. "All these years I tried to welcome you, and this is how you thank us." "You tried to control me," I said softly. "There's a difference." She didn't speak after that. She turned and walked out, slamming the door harder than necessary. Wendell didn't come out of the bedroom until dinner. He didn't speak to me, just stood in the hallway holding the eviction notice, reading it again like he expected the words to change. I said nothing. What was left to say? Later that night, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, the same way I had 4 years ago. I remembered that night clearly. Fireflies blinked against the hedges. The air smelled like cut grass and honeysuckle. Wendell had brought me a blanket and kissed the top of my head. It was quiet, and in that moment, I thought I could love him forever. That was the last time this house felt like mine. Everything after had been performance, a marriage built on pretenses and apologies and invisible bruises. Now it was just a structure. I'd already moved out emotionally years ago. By Sunday morning, movers arrived, per protocol. I stayed upstairs while they worked. The house filled with the sound of boxes being taped, drawers being emptied, and Delphine's dramatic sighs echoing from the hallway. At noon, I stood by the window and looked out. 2 duffel bags sat on the lawn, side by side. The only things Wendell and Delphine could carry that weren't contested. He was standing by the curb, phone in hand, yelling at someone, probably his lawyer, if he had one. She sat on the steps, fanning herself with a magazine, tears streaking her makeup. I didn't wave. I didn't go down. I just closed the blinds. And in that silence, I thought, they believed they owned me. They didn't even own the floor they stood on. 2 weeks passed since they dragged their bags off my porch. I didn't hear from Wendell, didn't see Delphine parked outside in her white SUV, and didn't receive any of those guilt-laced texts she used to send. Family is forever, or no marriage survives pride. Silence suited me. I spent those days reclaiming space. I moved furniture, painted the guest bedroom, repotted the plants Delphine insisted were too large for that corner, and let in more light. But the real shift wasn't in the house. It was in the world outside, online. It started with a notification. @MavenHouseOfficial has been tagged in a viral reel. I tapped it absent-mindedly, expecting another home chef or design blogger. But it wasn't just a feature. It was me. The reel began with a slideshow of Maven House cookware being unboxed, sleek matte black pans, minimalist utensils, packaging with quotes about reclaiming independence in the kitchen. But it wasn't the product that drew attention. It was the headline. The real woman behind Maven House. Underneath was my name, in full. Mariska L. Nguyen, founder and CEO. I dropped my phone. It had gone viral overnight. Thousands of likes, shares, reposts from women saying, "Finally, someone built something for us." Single moms, divorced women, women who were tired of being told cooking was their duty instead of their right to nourish. And then there was Wendell. I found out what he thought about it when Loretta sent me a screenshot. His Facebook status read, "Some people build their empires on manipulation. Don't believe everything you read. No names." Of course, cowardice rarely is that direct, but the comments piled on. Delphine had one too. Pretty branding doesn't mean good character. Sometimes the rod is underneath the shine. Aunt Maureen liked the post. So did Wendell's coworker Jim. I didn't reply. I didn't even breathe heavy. But Loretta? She did what best friends do. 2 days later, a journalist from a lifestyle magazine emailed me. "We're doing a follow-up on the Maven House feature," she wrote. "There have been a few anonymous posts questioning the integrity of the founder. Would you like to comment?" I didn't answer. Loretta did. She forwarded every document I'd compiled: the deed to the house, sole owner, me. The business registration, established a full year before I married Wendell. Screenshots of texts where Wendell mocked my early product designs, once calling them housewife fantasies. She included one of Delphine, too, when she'd texted me that real women cook without Instagram stunts. By the end of the week, the follow-up article went live. She built it without them, how one woman's company survived her divorce better than her husband did. It quoted Wendell's post word for word. Then it laid out the facts. Mariska Nguyen is the sole registered owner of Maven House LLC, filed independently before her marriage. Records show no evidence of partnership or co-founding with Mr. Wendell Hartman. It didn't need to drag him. Facts did the dragging just fine. The comment section flipped. People began posting side-by-side quotes. Wendell saying, "She cooks like my mom," my campaign slogan, for women who are done serving people who don't see them. Delphine's post vanished quietly, so did Wendell's. But then, another email landed in my inbox. Subject: a personal plea. It was from Delphine. "Mariska, I know we've had our differences, but this is getting out of hand. The media is painting Wendell like a failure. You know that's not fair. Whatever success you've had, it's because of the environment we gave him, the stability. Can't you share a little, for his sake?" I stared at it. I reread the line. "It's because of the environment we gave him." Like I was a plant that sprouted in their soil. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to Loretta with a short note. Exhibit C, entitlement. The next day, Wendell had a job interview. I didn't know the details, just that Loretta's cousin worked HR at the firm. Later that evening, Loretta texted me, "You'll love this." The interviewer apparently asked him, "Aren't you the guy who got evicted by the Maven House CEO?" Wendell had frozen, said nothing, then muttered something about miscommunication. They didn't hire him. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Instead, I sat on my porch with a cup of chai, the mug warm against my hands. Across the street, the sun was dipping low, casting a golden hue across the lawn. I watched the neighbor's dog chase a squirrel, listened to the faint hum of a lawnmower in the distance. I didn't smile, but inside, I felt still. Peace doesn't always come from silence. Sometimes it comes from knowing the truth stayed louder than the lies. He tried to frame me as a villain. I responded like a brand, with receipts. And now, sitting in Bishop's office 2 days later, the end was just a few pen strokes away. Bishop sat across from me, sleeves rolled up, glasses perched low on his nose. His voice was steady, the kind you lean on when your own feels shaky. "You've already won, Mariska," he said, sliding the documents toward me. "Now let's seal it." The paper was warm from the printer, but it could have been ice for how steady my hand stayed. I didn't rush. I read every clause like it was a vow in reverse. Every line was something I'd survived. I paused at the bottom, next to the X, the space that had once waited for me in his first draft, and signed it clean and full. Mariska L. Nguyen. I didn't flinch. Bishop stood, collected the papers, and walked them to the clerk without another word. The door clicked softly behind him. That was it. 10 years of us condensed into one envelope. 10 years of pretending I was less so, Wendell could feel like more. All gone in under an hour. I left a note with the receptionist on the way out. Not for Wendell. He wasn't there. He wouldn't be showing up for this. The note was simple, handwritten on the kind of courthouse scratch pad that still smelled faintly of toner. No anger, no fear, no return. I folded it and left it at the desk, asked them to place it in the finalized file. Outside, the air was bright and hot, the kind of dry heat that makes your lungs feel dusty even before you exhale. I didn't take the usual route home. I stopped by a little bakery that had opened down the street. I bought one croissant and sat outside, savoring it with a kind of deliberate slowness. I wasn't celebrating. I was acknowledging. Meanwhile, somewhere across town, the mailbox at Wendell's rented duplex clicked open. He would have seen the return address. Bishop Morrow, Family Law. He probably thought it was a follow-up letter, maybe a misplaced document. He opened it without thinking. Then he read the first line. "This is to confirm the court's acceptance of the finalized divorce decree, case number TX 486122. I didn't hear the reaction, of course, but Loretta later told me her friend who lived next door heard shouting, slamming, something glass breaking, and then silence. I imagined him storming through the cramped living room, pacing, demanding answers from Delphine, who was probably sitting on the lumpy recliner trying to breathe through her third round of sinus meds. She had fallen sick right after the eviction. Stress, maybe. Or just the weight of reality settling in. "She actually did it?" he must have yelled. Delphine wouldn't have responded right away. She hated being caught off guard. But eventually, she said the one line that told me she knew. "You should have never let her read those papers." It wasn't regret. It was fear. They thought I'd fold. Instead, I filed. Days later, Wendell stood in the middle of his rental, paint peeling near the baseboards. The coffee maker Delphine had insisted they keep now sat broken on the counter. The space smelled like old pizza and borrowed time. "This can't be my life," he said to no one. But it was. The life he thought he could control. The woman he thought he could corner. The house he thought he owned. Gone. All of it. And me? I wasn't watching it happen. I wasn't gloating from across the street. I wasn't even in Austin anymore. I was in Denver. A soft opening for Maven House, my first showroom. It wasn't glamorous. There was no ribbon cutting or champagne. Just me, Loretta, Jolene, and a room full of women who had been quietly cheering me on. Women who'd sent emails like, "You gave me permission to start again." Women who said they finally felt seen. There were no speeches, no bright lights. Only shelves lined with products I'd designed with women like me in mind. Pans that didn't require forearm strength to lift. Measuring spoons engraved with actual font sizes you could see without squinting. I poured a glass of sparkling water and lifted it quietly. "To living without fear of being erased," I said. Loretta clinked her glass against mine. "You didn't just survive, babe. You outbuilt him." I smiled, and this time, it wasn't the smile I used to wear for guests or at family barbecues. It was mine. Real. Rooted. Later that afternoon, when the last guest had left and Loretta was stacking glasses in the back, I stepped outside. The building was small, tucked into a quiet block in the Arts District. But the front was all glass, clear and unapologetic. And across the top of the door, in matte gold letters, it read, "Mariska L. Nguyen, founder CEO. I walked up, placed my palm gently on the glass just beneath my name, and closed my eyes. This wasn't a rebirth. It was a return. He handed me divorce papers thinking I'd beg. He forgot who he married. He tried to break me quietly, but I ended us permanently. It's been a little over a month since I signed the final page, since I walked out of the courthouse and left behind not just a chapter, but an entire story that was no longer mine to carry. No press, no witnesses, no one watching the ending but me, and that was enough. Since then, I've packed up what was mine. Not just belongings, parts of myself. The small, scattered pieces that I had silenced or tucked away so that someone else could shine louder in the room. I boxed up the compromises, taped shut the parts where I'd bent too far, too often, and walked into a life where every corner reflects my breath, my rhythm, my name. Freedom is a quiet kind of revolution. Some mornings, it still catches me off guard. Waking to the soft filter of sunlight through my sheer curtains, the silence that isn't tense or uncertain, but comforting. Real, like taking a breath after holding it too long underwater. That morning started like most now. Coffee brewed in the kitchen. My apartment calm. The air carried the smell of toasted cardamom from the bakery downstairs. I sat at my desk, scrolling through campaign drafts and sketching out new ideas, when my phone buzzed. A text. From Wendell. The name lit up the screen like a ghost that hadn't yet realized it was dead. I hadn't heard from him since we signed the final paperwork. No closure call. No awkward apology. Just absence. The message was long. Too long for someone who had once claimed I made him feel suffocated by all the talking. You were stronger than I thought. You won. Happy. I stared at it for a moment. My thumb hovered over the reply bubble, but there was no knot in my chest, no anger bubbling to the surface, no heartbreak waiting to claw its way back. Just clarity. I typed, "You never really knew me, that's why you lost me." And then I deleted the thread. Not out of spite, not to be dramatic, but because I didn't need it anymore. It served no purpose in this life I'd built on the other side of him. Later that afternoon, I opened the small velvet jewelry box tucked away in the back of my closet. Inside, beneath a pair of rarely worn earrings, was a folded piece of yellowed stationery. The edges were soft from time, but the handwriting hadn't faded. My mother's letter. She had written it the summer before I left for college. I'd read it once, tucked it away, and forgotten it through years of holidays, arguments, and messy compromises masquerading as love. I read it again now, line by line, as if for the first time. Never shrink to fit into someone else's idea of love. You are not too much. You are exactly enough. I sat on the edge of my bed and wept, not because I was broken, but because I wasn't anymore. Because somewhere, beneath all the roles I had tried to play, the woman my mother had written to was still here. That weekend, I went to the frame shop on the corner. I chose a frame with dark wood and a matte finish, simple, strong, honest. I hung it just inside my front door. Now, every time I leave or come home, I see her words first. A compass, a reminder. A few days later, I booked a one-way ticket to Garland. I didn't pack a suitcase, just a shoulder bag and enough quiet resolve to carry me through. The drive from Dallas was slow, steady. I passed places that hadn't changed. Gas stations with peeling signs, the old Dairy Queen with the blinking queue, the church where I once gave a speech on forgiveness I hadn't yet learned to believe in. And then, finally, I reached the street where my childhood had lived. The house was still there. Same brick, same crooked mailbox. The tree in the front yard was taller now, casting long shadows across the lawn. It looked like it had seen everything and survived it anyway. I didn't walk up to the door. I didn't need to. I stood at the edge of the sidewalk, hands in my pockets, and whispered, I didn't leave broken. I left unfinished. And that was all the closure I needed. Back in Denver, life continued. The showroom that once held rough prototypes now sparkled with final products, beautiful, functional, mine. The team I built was thriving. We didn't run on fear or hierarchy. We ran on respect. I was no longer the one trying to prove herself in every meeting. I was simply the one who'd built it from the ground up, without apology. Evenings were quieter now. No debates over what to eat, no tension over the remote, just the gentle hum of music playing as I cooked a meal for one, danced barefoot in the kitchen, watered my plants. But even peace carries echoes. Some nights, I'd roll over in bed and feel the ghost of his absence, not because I missed him, but because habits linger longer than love. That's when I'd reach for the frame by the door, run my fingers along its edge. Whisper, healing doesn't mean forgetting, because it doesn't. It means living well despite the memory. One afternoon, I was walking past my storefront when I overheard two women talking outside. They didn't see me. "That's her," one said, nodding. "She's the one who left him, the guy who tried to take everything." The other woman looked at me as I passed. She smiled. "You didn't just leave him," she said. "You reclaimed you." I smiled back. She was right. This wasn't a story about divorce, or even revenge. It was a story about return. To myself. To the woman who danced too loudly in the kitchen, who asked too many questions, who loved too deeply and refused to be folded into a smaller shape. This wasn't about loss. It was about liberation. He tried to break me quietly, but I rebuilt louder, and I carry myself, not as a survivor, but as a woman who walked through fire and came out holding her own hand, not because she had to, but because finally, she could. Sometimes, the loudest kind of strength is the one that never raises its voice. Mariska didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't fight back the way others expected. Instead, she planned, endured, and when the moment was right, she walked away with her head high. This story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming your identity when the world has tried to write your story for you. Have you ever been underestimated like Mariska? Have you ever had to rebuild from silence? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real, powerful stories like this one.